Golden Axe, the 1989 beat-em-up game, an icon of one of the greatest eras of gaming. One of the more popular and well-liked Sega Genesis games, and not so popular and disliked Xbox 360 games. Is due for new life and justice in the world of 3D gaming. Hopefully from a rather reputable and respectable game developer, Bethesda, Monolith, Capcom. Anyone that has had the opportunity to play any of the original 3 games, or even had the opportunity to get their hands on the arcade game, Revenge of Death Adder, I would imagine have very fond memories rooted in nostalgia when it comes to this franchise, like myself. Most people I have talked to personally have all played the original Golden Axe that released in 1989. However, I have not spoke to many people that have played or were even aware of the 2 sequels. If I'm going to be honest, when Sega Genesis was still in production, I didn't know that there were 2 sequels either. I probably didn't find out it was a complete trilogy until I was in my 20s, at which point I made sure to get my hands on a copy of both games and complete the full Golden Axe experience. While my memory of the last 2 Genesis games is cloudy at best, I do remember Golden Axe 2 being a worthy sequel, enjoyable and arguably just as good as the original, and Golden Axe 3, while not horrible, definitely was the worst of the bunch. I only played the sequels for one complete playthrough each, so my level of endearment doesn't compare to the original, which was by my side for 20 years, with countless of playthroughs enriched with blood, sweat, tears, anger, and happiness. Rebooting makes the most sense to me, being that the sequels are generally not as well known as the original, so it would make sense to retell and replay the original story and get a fresh start and reap the benefits that come with modern tech and modern gaming, rather than continuing established continuity and story from a game decades ago that probably got a little bit more obscure with each forward title. For anyone that may be familiar with the original story, you and your friends in co-op choose to play as one of 3 heroes. Gilly's Thunderhead, the axe-swinging dwarf, my personal favorite. Axe Battler, the barbarian wielder of the broadsword. And the wielder of the longsword, the Amazonian Tyrus Flare. I would not be surprised if anyone did not really know the story behind the game back then. Like many games during that era, there wasn't a whole lot of exposition, and many games give you extended information in the manuals that come with a purchased game. If any of you are like me, born in the 80s, growing up in the 90s, I don't remember where 75% of the games in the house came from. I just remember the consoles existing in the home with many of the games. And half of the games we had did not have cases, and the ones that did have cases, half of those did not have manuals in them. Likely, some of the games were not purchased from the store, but likely borrowed from some of my older brother's friends and never returned, or traded for other games or trading cards of some sort. For all of you young folks out there, that's how it was in the 90s. Lucky for us, the internet is infinite with possibilities in 2025, so I was able to get my hands on the US Golden Axe manual that provides a little bit of story for your journey through Yuria. Now, according to the Golden Axe Wiki fandom page, the Japanese manual has a more extensive story description, but we will touch on that more later. As for the people of America, this is what we had for our version of Golden Axe. So, short story short, yeah, you heard that correctly. Yuria is a strange land with evil oppressors. Death Adder soldiers have invaded every village, and Death Adder himself has massacred thousands. Finally, he's kidnapped the king and his daughter, the princess, and seized the Golden Axe. Only the strongest and craftiest warriors now have any chance of defeating him. 3 warriors appeared to challenge Death Adder. Axe Battler, the terrible barbarian, arrives from the far plains. His mighty strength and courage is a match for any enemy. Tyrus Flare, the Amazon, appears from the deep jungles to overcome the oppressors. With sword skill and lightning magic, lightning magic,
Very poor choice of words.
She vows to save the kingdom. Gillius Thunderhead, the dwarf, swings a deadly axe. His tricks and speed in battle can outwit even the most brutal giant. These 3, like many others, have lost cherished loved ones in the war against the reptile fiend Death Adder. Now they swear to defeat him, even at the cost of their lives. The challenge is overwhelming. Defeat all of Death Adder's soldiers and beasts, travel to the treacherous route to his castle, demolish Death Adder Jr., and then face the most powerful enemy, Death Adder himself. The reward? Saving the lives of the king and princess and returning peace to the kingdom. That's the plan. But there could be a surprise ending. And yeah, the player goes out to save Yuria from the grasps of Death Adder, fighting through hordes of minions, some challenging bosses, and smacking gnomes around for food and health. And that's it. Simple story for a more simplistic time in gaming. I believe we have enough here to build off of and make a much deeper, compelling story in modern gaming. Give all the characters more depth, more story, and more understanding than what they were provided originally, as character development is something that has evolved over the years. Imagine a fully immersive 3D world into Yuria, an open world adventure. Think Dragon's Dogma, think Shadow of Mordor, think Skyrim, except Golden Axe. A world brimming with life of all kinds, many different biomes to traverse, main quests, side quests, friends, enemies, frenemies, thieves, danger, excitement, and adventure. Play in first-person or third-person perspectives. Upgrade skills and enhance weapons as you build your characters up through skill trees and workbenches. Imagine imbuing Gillius Thunderhead's battle axe with electric properties for extra damage or passive effects, and the same with Tyrus Flare's fire properties. Characters can now have secondary weapons at their disposal that offer different benefits and combat that the primary weapons do not. Tailor your warrior to a fighting style that you prefer with the selection of weapons available. For example, use a bow and arrow for long-range combat as a secondary option, or twin daggers may be a suitable secondary weapon in situations where you want to attack quickly in close quarters with minimal strike lag, while also offering quick attack canceling and evasive maneuvers. Probably more ideal for a character that is not as tanky, but relatively mobile and nimble. Speaking of tanky and nimble, what about incorporating character baseline stats? Not necessarily anything new or groundbreaking, as some beat-em-up games did have this feature back in the 90s, but the original Golden Axe did not. For example, Axe Battler, given his size and strength, may have the highest attack and moderate defense stat but suffers in speed. Tyrant's Flare may have great speed but lacks in attack power and defense. Thunderhead, last but not least, may give you the best balance between all characters across the board. This is just an example. Don't beat me up over it. And folks, we cannot forget mana, aka magic. Who can forget summoning powers of each character's special attacks from the original game, while also having varying tiers of special abilities dependent on how much expendable magic you had. There are so many different systems and ideas that can be thrown around as far as spell casting and mana. The tier ranking is fantastic, but now it can be better established with more spells and the player actually having the ability to choose which spell they want to use given its costs, regardless of how much total mana they already have. Now this is something they did incorporate in Golden Axe 2, but in Golden Axe 3 they went back to how it was in the original game. That is, if you had max mana, you automatically used the most powerful spell once activated, and were left depleted and having the need to rack up more mana afterwards. But you tell me, how would you allocate these stats appropriately? What's the best mana system? What other stats do you think would fit well into the game? Let me know in the comment section. Of course, like in the games before it, faster travel would be available by means of beasts. Now, according to the official US Golden Axe manual, these beasts were technically called Bizarrians. My personal favorite was the flame-throwing and fire spitball dragons that you could ride. And being that I am pitching for a large open-world game, fast travel should also be an option when wanting to cover very large distances quickly. That can be via towers like in the open-world Zelda games, or something else that fits into the storyline and aesthetic of the game. One thing I have always appreciated are games that give the antagonists some depth when necessary. Sometimes villains can have compelling backstories that may give some credence to their motives and decisions. I don't think it's always necessary, but if done well, it definitely adds another layer of depth to the story. Not that every antagonist needs some understanding and sympathy. Sometimes antagonists are just downright inherently evil, and it's that cut and dry, and even then can still tell for a compelling story in ways. Based on the information I know about Golden Axe, Death Adder just seems like a downright evil person that is power hungry and wants to be a tyrant ruler. If that's the case, I would like to know more about it, more about him. How did he acquire his army? Did he conquer other kingdoms? What of his family and lineage? Why Yuria? Or, on the other hand, was he misguided as a youth? Did he suffer loss and tragedy at the hands of Yuria? Was the kingdom supposed to be his right, and he was wrongfully cut off? I have so many questions. Now, I mentioned earlier that according to the Golden Axe fandom wiki page, quote, the story varies depending on the version, this story being from the Japanese Mega Drive manual. For the record, I am always very skeptical of the validity of the information on wiki pages for all the obvious reasons. With that being said, different versions of the same game in different locations around the world is not something uncommon. So take that information with what I'm about to share with you. This is how the story translates from the Japanese version as explained by the Wiki fan page. In ancient times, a race of ruthless giants appeared from the darkness of the world and challenged the great gods to a battle. Both forces fought to a stalemate, and the fight seemed to last forever. But the fight suddenly came to an end when the power of the giants had been contained, and they were driven away back to the darkness. The battle was over, but it led to the demise of many of those who had fought. Those left alive in the land of the gods owned a weapon, the golden axe. After a long time, humans began to emerge in the former land of the gods. The golden axe already left the hand of the gods, and the land was reigned by humans. One of the evil giants that had survived, Death Adder, tricked the humans and took the axe. Evil forces returned to the land, starting an era of darkness. The outcome of Axe Battler's hunt was better than expected, and he was calmly returning home in a good mood when he thought how happy he will make his mother back at home. He increases his speed. After his father died when he was still young, bringing a smile to his mother was very important to him. At the entrance of the village, Axe Battler noticed there was no sign of people, and what he saw kept him standing on the spot. A heap of corpses were lying in the village. No way! His mother came to his mind and he rushed back home. In his house, scattered furniture and his mother lying in a pool of blood reflected in Axe's eyes. Mother, Axe mutters, and he gets speechless while standing still in place. Lately, the country of the Firewood Kingdom has been nervous since the forces of Death Adder began appearing near its border. However, just today was different. It's the 17th birthday of Princess Tyrus Flare. A grand celebration was being carried out in the country. While the country is festive, one of the messenger soldiers came into the royal palace. It was intended to communicate an attack of Death Adder's army. The queen stood up and ordered the whole army to prepare. However, the Firewood army was banged off guard while brittle. Superposed and retreating, when the enemy troops surrounded the royal palace, the queen took her only daughter, Tyrus, to a small room underground and hid her. Eventually, by the time the chaos outside had yielded, Tyrus finally broke out of the room. However, the royal palace was like hell. Throughout the castle were fallen soldiers or friends and enemies. Therewith was also her parents. Tyrus cried, angry with the gods and cursing Death Adder. She hated herself for being powerless. Everywhere in Firewood Kingdom, a fight was going on between the residents and the troops of Death Adder. It was almost ending with an overwhelming victory of Death Adder's forces, with all of those who opposed being killed. Gillies Thunderhead and his younger brother and only relative, Gari, had participated in the battle as soldiers from the Firewood Kingdom. However, the situation moves toward the unfavorable for Gillies, and eventually Death Adder's army appeared in front of the Firewood Castle. The kingdom's army fought well, but fell one after another in front of the overwhelming amount of enemies. Gillies too was one of the people facing the enemy soldiers. During the battle, he let his guard down for a moment while tired and was hit in the back, releasing a cry while falling unconscious on the spot. After a while, Gillies' cheeks felt warm and he regained consciousness. Someone else seemed to be lying above him. He could not move. Shaking with force, the twisted body above him appeared to be trying to protect Gillies. Then, when taking a better look, what reflected in the eyes of Gillies was the figure of his brother laying on Gillies as if to protect him. "Gory!" Gillies cried, echoed on the empty battlefield, as if lasting forever. Now, if all of this is completely true, this may have answered some of my questions and maybe some questions others may have. But a lot of this information was not available in the US manual. Some of it was, not all of it. Even if all of this information is complete bullshit, it still tells a good story regardless that can be used in a reboot for the series. And for those of you that may have went to the wikipedia.com website and searched Golden Axe, you probably read something along the lines of, quote, an evil entity known as Death Adder has captured the king of Yuria and his daughter and holds them captive in their castle. He also finds the Golden Axe, the magical emblem of Yuria, and threatens to destroy both the axe and the royal family unless the people of Yuria accept him as their ruler. Close quote. Now, my response to this, the part about Death Adder threatening to destroy both the axe and the royal family unless the people of Yuria accept him as the ruler, is found nowhere in the US manual and isn't described quite like that in the Japanese version. So I'm certainly questioning the validity of that. And honestly, it doesn't even make sense when presented like that. His motives and plan of attack seem rather questionable. So you mean to tell me Death Adder captures the king and the princess and the mythical magical Golden Axe and will destroy all of them unless Yuria accepts him as their ruler? None of this makes any sense. A dude named Death Adder. Death motherfucking Adder. A dude named Death Adder, I'm pretty sure at a minimum would slay the royal family on sight and immediately establish his rule over Yuria, whether people wanted to accept him or not, and they would have no choice. Anyone against him or part of the rebellion will be tortured, enslaved, or killed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Threatening to kill the royal family or else is weak and just doesn't make any sense. Now, if you write something in there where he needs to keep them alive for a very specific reason, then okay, but other than that, what purpose do they serve alive? Next, the Golden Axe itself. It is stated it's a magical emblem of Yuria. What is the actual significance? Specifically, what powers would someone gain from wielding this special item? Why would Death Adder opt to destroy it once obtaining it? I would imagine Death Adder would use the Golden Axe to his advantage, whether that means keeping it in his possession or destroying it for whatever reason. But I can't see a logical scenario where it would benefit him to destroy the Golden Axe unless someone writes in that specific plot armor for it. But that's up to the storytellers. My thing is, just make it make sense. That's a wrap for today's episode. I appreciate each and every one of you for stepping in, showing your love, showing your support, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Now I could sit here and smack you all around with the generic like, comment, subscribe BS, but nobody gives a damn about that. So do whatever the hell you want to do, because you're going to do it anyway. Now, I'm going to give you to the count of 10 to get your ugly, yellow, no good keister off my property before I pump your guts full of lead. I am Boo, and I am out.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.